Welcome to the Give Back Lab. I'm your host, Daniella Grande. You've entered a space where bold voices, real stories, and unfiltered conversations come to life. Here in the lab, we're breaking bias, shifting thinking, and exploring the power of giving back through truth, vulnerability, and diverse perspectives. We celebrate diversity of thought and everything beautiful that makes us human. This isn't just talk, it's real, it's raw, and it's exactly the kind of space we need. We're unlearning, relearning, and evolving together. Let's dive in. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today at the Give Back Lab. It is my pleasure to welcome our guest today, Tiankai Feng. Please give him a warm welcome. And thank you for coming to join us. And today we're going to talk about data and AI, inclusivity in that space, and some of the other things that make you individualistically you, which I love. And I'm not going to even give any more than that little teaser about because I want people to be excited. I was super excited when I learned about those parts of you. And super excited to have that conversation today. So I want to keep that little bit under wraps, if that's okay. And just let's start out. You're just back off of a keynote speech over at Big Data in London. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Awesome. I hear great things. So, let's dive in. Let's talk about data and AI and inclusivity. What's happening in that space and where are we going?
Yeah, absolutely. I think with data and AI, that is a space that has always been on the verge of pushing technology forward, right? I think the last few waves that we now have seen of really technological innovation were all driven together or for data and AI. And I think it started all with information being so much available in the world, right? Like everything was measured and tracked all of a sudden, like websites and social media and bank transactions, everything was digitalized, and that created a footprint that was recorded in data, right? And for the longest time, I think that data was meant to drive value in organizations, right? So analyzing it and then actually making decisions based on it would lead to more revenue. But it was all easier said than done. So for the longest time, it was that thing where only a few people in an organization would be competent enough to actually know what they're doing with the data. But even if they knew what they were doing with the data, a lot of the other people in the organization would not listen to them. So that tension field was always there. But now suddenly with AI and with all of the GPTs and the other, let's say, Gen AI chatbots that we have, it drove a lot of the demand towards everyone wanting to have access to AI applications and also having that in organizations. And suddenly that space also drove the demand towards data because an AI application is only as good as the context it gets and that it learns from. And that is, in that case, data. So all of a sudden it's all turned and everyone realizes that AI needs good data. So everyone asks, how do we make the data better? So there's now an interest in working with data as much as never before. And that is now basically driving it. So what that has to do with inclusivity is that while before it was very hard to get into the data space, and not only that, but the data people wanted people to get into the data space and they tried to make it somehow popular by making people join it. It slowly turned now into saying like data people saying, oh, not everyone should join it. There's a little bit this thing of people need to learn first how to work with data before they can join forces with us. And somewhere in between that hype and that really two extremes, I think there's a good balance to be found, right? Where it's always easy to say us against the others, right? But what about us with them, right? And we all, with different expertise areas, can help with data and AI. So I believe that we should proactively make it inclusive and not go the easy way of keeping it exclusive, as many people would do.
Right. And I mean, I look at data and I think if we talk about that piece a little bit, right, where it was a situation where we wanted people to come and embrace data. I think a lot of that was probably done and as an operationally minded person and somebody who spent so many years in operations of all levels and sorts. It's the
Exactly.
back office stuff, right? It's not sexy. It's not cool.
Yeah.
And so nobody wants to think about it, right? And so now, because it is the thing,
Yeah.
right? It is the thing that drives scalability, that drives growth, that drives a new revenue channel. The data is the driver,
Hmm.
and not so much just, the backseat passenger at this point. And so I think that that explains that shift, and I totally get it. I would love to talk to you about and around data, the garbage in, garbage out, that whole
Hmm.
thing, right? And how is that affecting AI? So let's talk about that a little bit because I have a few more questions in that space, and I think I'd like to evolve this conversation to really let's talk about the hard things about that, right?
Absolutely.
It's a there's been d- 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 Data's been the guy with the red stapler in the basement from that movie Office Space, right?
Yeah, I know.
For so
With
long,
the thick
right,
glasses.
Gord?
Yeah.
Yes, with the red
Yeah.
stapler. Where's my red stapler? So I'd like to talk about it, right? So we've gone from Data being in the basement with the red stapler to suddenly they're in the C-suite, right?
Hmm.
Top floor, penthouse floor, right? So let's talk about that a little bit. What How is that affecting the data world itself, right?
Yeah.
That phenomenon.
Yeah, that is a great question. I think it does feel like, as you mentioned, from being the most unpopular person for suddenly being the super popular person. And it's so hard to even just adjust to that suddenly, right? From nobody looking for me to everyone looking for me. This is a crazy change, right? And as with everything, and I think as famously featured in pop culture, instant fame or like overnight fame can do weird things to people, right? They either get really scared or they get really overpowered and suddenly become super arrogant. All these character traits come out, and I see that similarly happening actually in the data space as well, right? Where either you can go into, wow, now I'm super popular, I can even more talk about how great I am and I make everyone feel weaker than me, so then
Right.
people keep on looking up to me. Or I could use my popularity to say, let me teach you all how it works and we can all do it together. I don't have to be the only one doing it. Let's all do it together. Or I can also say, oh my God, I cannot deal with this. I chose to work on that because I didn't want to deal with people. I'm going to hide now and I'm not
Right.
going to work with
Right.
anyone anymore.
Right.
Right. And all of these personality traits are, I think, reflected in the way how we show up at work now and how data professionals, data leadership, chief data officers, as you call them in the C level, right? And how they basically deal with that space of data. But and also what you said about garbage in, garbage out, right? I think what many people don't realize is that data is not just a single department's responsibility, but
Yes.
data is being produced everywhere and used everywhere as well, right? Similar, like in simple words said, as an example, a sales manager would create a customer record for the first time, right? And puts down a name and an address of a customer for the first time. And at that point, that person has created data in the organization, right?
Right.
And then it flows into all kinds of different systems. And at some point, there might be an data scientist who wants to make a prediction model about what customers might buy what products and spend how much money on it, and is using exactly that same record to use it. But in between, they might not even know each other, right? That salesperson and that data scientist, they might not even know that they exist for each other. All they
Right.
see is the data that's in between, and it has gone through a lot of transforming and moving and replication. So it just becomes a big black box. And I think in a lot of ways, that's the same challenge as in the past as it is now for AI, right? Where we need to understand what data do we actually have? Where does it come from? Can we trust it? And what can we do with it? All those questions need to be answered so we actually do the right things with it. And at least having someone in the C suite dealing with that gives them the right channels to talk to the right people. So those questions can be answered a little faster. And then we can define what the right things are to do with data.
Oh, absolutely. And I see a lot of organizations that are going through transformation and
Mm-hmm.
adopting AI, and all of that is fantastic.
Right.
My position is that's all fantastic, but if you're not adapting your processes and
Absolutely.
analyzing your data, right? if you move from one platform to another, but you are not looking at it holistically in either how you're executing and conducting business, how you're reaching customers, whatever it is, and what data we are measuring, because
Right.
presumably the data of yesteryear that we were measuring, right? The data
Mm-hmm.
we were measuring 5 years ago, maybe even just 3 years ago, maybe even a year ago, is very different than the data we need to be measuring today and tomorrow. And so the conversation that is from an operational executive standpoint, that is a conversation that I have continually had, right? Where we have to, as we transform, going through business transformation, and you go from legacy systems to digital systems, when as you evolve, you have to evolve completely, and that includes processes and data. So do
Right.
you see in this AI space, right, because it's so new, do you see these habits continuing, or is it this is a new space, it's a new generation, and so the old habits have gone off with old corporate and we
Mm-hmm.
think differently? Is that what's
Yeah.
happening?
I think no, I think even less in the opposite side, even more on the opposite side, because what's happening is not only is it forcing people to change their habits and change their processes, how they deal with it, but they even feel threatened by it, right? Because
Yes.
AI is being talked about in the media and by a lot of the tool providers as in we're going to replace human beings, right? And
Right. Right.
that is such a statement to make that has never happened for data, right? We never said data is going to replace people, but we now start saying AI is going to replace people. So now you have that inherent resistance in every organization to say as soon as they hear about AI and automation and agents, they're going to be worried about their jobs, right?
Right.
So what before was optional. Felt like, okay, I might deal with the data if I feel like it, but I might also not deal with the data, and that's also fine. Nothing's going to break. Now becomes I better face the AI now because otherwise I'm going to lose my job. So I have to either go with it or I'm going to sabotage it. Whatever I'm going to do, I have to do
Right.
something. Otherwise, I'm going to
Right.
be redundant. And that is such a big motivation to have for people, right? To say, I'm the one who's standing in the way of this new thing. What is my role in it? Do I become someone who knows about the new thing that I need to deal with? Or someone who's just gonna let it stop it in any way I can, so I protect what I can do. And again, that is a question of humanity, right? What is my attitude towards work? Am I willing to learn new things and adjust,
Yeah.
or have I always just wanted to a 9 to 5 job where I just do the same thing over and over again because that's what I'm good at, and I don't actually want to do anything new.
Right. Right.
So yeah, I think that is
Absolutely.
a really interesting one when we think about habits and what is comes from the attitude that we have towards AI and what we perceive about it.
Right. No, that's I mean, I look at I look at people and the role that AI is playing in their lives, and the
Right.
stress and the mental health issues that it's causing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Um, Even if you are not in AI in the tech field, and you know, I don't a mortician.
Yeah.
A mortician is probably not worried that AI is going to come and take their job. However, I know that AI can still affect their life positively or
Yeah.
negatively, right?
Mm-hmm.
Using ChatGPT to create content for marketing or for engagement with with the families, or for advice on counsel. So there starts to be a balance of, and I'm super interested in this space, the balance of how we as humans evolve with
Yeah.
AI, right? So it's not a right now it's fight or flight. So people are fighting it, or they're fleeing it. Some are embracing it in little increments. But how do we evolve it together? Right?
Yeah.
How do we evolve it together for us as humans, our own mental health on every level? There are people that I know that use the AI as a therapist.
They
Wow.
use AI as a counselor, right? They
Yeah.
have a question. I'm feeling this way. And what they need to understand, and what I try to explain to people, is ChatGPT is only as good as the information that it's fed, right? And as you download paid subscriptions and things like that, it gets to know you better, right? That's the beauty
Right.
of it. It gets to know the way you speak and the way you write and your tone and the things you're interested in. But it's also scripted in such a way, if naturally, unless you put different prompts in and you become a prompt master at this point, right? Um,
Right.
to kind of cater to you.
Hmm.
So when people start using it as a therapist and things like that, I start to worry about mental health. And so the question around data, all of that to say that the question around inclusivity, right, in this space is important, because the data that we have and the program and the AI applications also come with the bias that the people who develop them have, right?
Absolutely.
Anybody who has been part of this podcast knows that I try to go in without any bias at all, very little information, because I want these conversations to be very organic and very authentic. And
Right.
so I appreciate you and all of my other guests who allow me that
Hmm.
ability. Um, but how do we combat that, right? Where that piece.
Absolutely. I think you have a really interesting point, because if I think about how AI is communicating with human beings, AI makes themselves, or AI applications let human beings think they're very inclusive, right? Because no matter what you do, they actually really are charming almost, right? They confirm all your
Yes,
thoughts,
yes.
right? They go deeper on
Say,
your thoughts.
I
They
am
help you find more.
fabulous.
Exactly. They're always reaffirming what you already said. So
Yes.
in a way, it does feel like, wow, this chatbot, this AI really likes me. I think we're gonna get along very great. But the thing about it is that disinformation or hallucinations or any kind of these things are not really good, right? Because they really confirm the wrong things and the things that you shouldn't get confirmed by or reaffirmed by, meaning that it doesn't actually have any critical human thinking, right? It's not like it has a moral compass where a good friend would tell you if you are thinking something that you shouldn't be doing. And a chatbot would rather just say, my default is I'm going to support your thoughts. So I'm going to give you even more arguments to support your point of view, instead of a great friend telling you, sorry, but this is something I can't agree with. I think you should probably stop, right, about this.
Right.
And just having said, the reason why that is I believe, and I talk about that also in terms of creativity between AI and human beings, is that an AI is imitating human beings by learning from the outputs of human beings, right?
Mm,
It doesn't actually learn from the process that goes on in our heads and in our hearts, right? So
right.
when
Right.
we have so-called gut feeling and in our heads, we have a thought process and we come up with an idea, or suddenly something makes click and we change our minds about something quickly,
Right.
all the things we don't, as human beings, have not even researched properly yet how it works, right, in our brain. But what AI does, it only learns from the things we write, so what comes out of us, what we have said, but not how we thought about it. So in a
Right.
way, it just imitates the output, not the process. So that makes it makes it feel like so eerily human, but
Yes.
actually it isn't human. So why should we trust it, right? If there's not really a person that is properly thinking like me, it's only imitating basically words that other human beings have written or said out loud, then is that really the right way to deal with it? So in that way, right? This is not to say we should all stop using AI, right? We should
Mm,
use AI, and it definitely is going to make us more productive and probably faster in our thought processes. We just need to keep the critical thinking lens on it, right? Like be
yeah.
clear about when it's actually I shouldn't believe this, and this is not actually the right advice, and give that feedback back to the people that are creating and providing that AI application, because they need to learn from it. And the only power we have as consumers of it are providing feedback and telling them, no, this is not okay, this shouldn't happen, and hope that they actually take it into consideration.
Right. No, and that's a great point, right? Because it has the information that we have. So it has 10 different books on it with 10 different opinions. Let's just to put an example out there. 10,
Yeah,
10 different books, 10 different opinions. You ask it a question, it is going to feed you the one that that would probably resonate
exactly.
uh,
Statistically,
most with
yes,
you,
most likely. Yeah,
right? So it's all on how things resonate, right? The
exactly.
purpose of it, because if it didn't do that, we would never use it. I am
Correct.
not going to use ChatGPT if it's telling me I'm wrong all the time,
That's true.
right?
Yes, absolutely.
What do you think about this? I'm thinking about this, right? It will get to know, just like when we have friends and family and children and spouses, and we know how they think and how they operate. And when we want to communicate with them, very important things, we analyze, we process, we think about how we're going to deliver that message to them, right? And we as humans may spend hours, days, months thinking about delivering even a hard message. Chat could give it to you in a few seconds. Um, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's the right way for that person. It's the right way for you.
Yeah, exactly. So it will show you the one opinion that might resonate with you the most because it's most similar to what you're saying, but it might not be what you need to hear, right? So especially, let's say in a research context, right? If someone is looking for different opinions about something and they need to make a judgment by hearing all of the different sides and the different aspects of a certain science question, then just hearing the same research being done in different ways doesn't help as much as hearing a completely different approach to it, right? And
Right.
something that we as human beings would read between the lines almost, right? And we would kind of sense it by what that person needs to hear is not something that an AI chatbot actually knows how to even interpret. It just takes literally what you're writing in the prompt, right, into consideration and then reacts rationally to it, not emotionally as we human beings would do.
Right. So, all of those brainstorming sessions that it replaces, while it may save you time and increase velocity to getting
Yeah,
something done, but does it really give you complete diversity of thought? Right?
exactly.
Which is what we celebrate here at the Give Back Lab podcast, right? It's the
Hmm.
celebration of diversity of thought and everything that makes us human, that brings us together to be able to be inclusive, and that piece of it. So, as you're working in this data and I space and as it's evolving, how do you see these issues being tackled and addressed? Where do you see this evolving? Because this is such a fast paced
Yeah.
space.
I think there are two sides to it, right? On the one hand side, it's about how we can fine tune and control how AI chatbots are behaving, right? So we can tell them to not always just be the yes person, right? But be
Mm,
someone who actually follows up with another question, right? Do you want me to confirm your point of view, or do you want me to give you something that you might have not thought about? And make it a little bit more feedback based, simply, right? It can still be intuitive, but more tailored by just basically acting in a certain way. The other way is the upskilling of the users, right? Because there's only as much as we can do how we control AI chatbots. The thing about generative AI is that also that it's not deterministic, but it's probabilistic. So we will never be able to fully control what the output and the kind of outcome will be, but we can only make it like going in a certain direction and predictable. So in the end, that leaves us with the customers and consumers of those applications. They need to keep having that critical thinking and know when to judge it with a human lens and not just blindly trust it. And that requires training. It requires more hands-on experience and just let people learn, not only through the hard way of having bad experiences, but maybe even sharing the bad experiences and the good
right.
experiences to then actually all be better together on how to deal with AI.
Right. I I I am a huge proponent, and love sharing of the lessons learned. I love it.
Absolutely.
I
Yeah.
love it. Come to the table, tell me how you failed flat
Yeah.
on your face. Let's celebrate that failure, right? Every failure does not need to be negative. Let's
Absolutely.
celebrate the fact that now we have more information, more data, so we can help you either not do it again or
Yeah.
help somebody else, right? There's always something positive that can come out of a negative. And I think that we should normalize that more. We should normalize talking about, oh my God, do you know what happened to me today? I made the biggest error, or I was so confident that, this prompt was so fantastic, or that this thing was going to happen. And I learned these things, right? And we
Absolutely.
should talk about it. And that I think lends to this conversation about inclusivity, right?
Exactly.
Because inclusivity celebrates that diversity of thought. It celebrates the wins and the losses and the forward momentum and the evolutionary period as we go through that, right? So how do you see, do you have any real world examples in life, whether at work or personal or something, you just came back from this conference. I'm sure there was tons of conversation on that. Can you share with our audience some real life examples so they can really get a good understanding for inclusivity and this diversity of thought in this data and AI space?
Yeah, absolutely. I think with maybe especially on the lessons learned part of it all, right? If because the failures are happening on very public level too nowadays, right? I mean, I think there's this very famous case study where Chevrolet was creating that chatbot, right? And they allowed that chatbot to actually make legally, contractually solid transactions, and a customer basically was able to prompt into the chatbot to say, "Sell me a car for $1." And the chatbot confirmed it. And then the sales was going through, right? It was legally obliged to do that and
Right.
contractually
Legally.
obliged to, right? And that is something that really is something that can publicly very much let everyone know what can go wrong, and everyone learns from it, right? But we don't have to wait, I think, until some things become like public sensational
Right.
failures, right? We can
Right.
also just share among ourselves and in communities, in smaller groups at work, on what works, when it doesn't work. And I mean, I think one typical example is having more and more of these communities of practice and organizations, right? Where, let's say, the more technical people of AI come together and they exchange about the risks and opportunities of new LLMs and models, for example. Other people who might be just users of the chatbots might come together to share about prompt best practices and prompt worst practices and how to do that. I heard a lot about that kind of exchange also at the conference, for example, right? Where people were now making a proactive effort to let human beings come together and talk about it more. And it's interesting because it's like the opposite of how we actually interact with AI, right? Because what AI does to us is we kind of isolate ourselves, right? We talk to one-on-one to that machine basically, and then we don't talk to any other human beings anymore because this is how we then work. But we kind of take a step out of it and need to talk to other human beings. So we actually learn how to then work better, interact better with the AI chatbots. And that, I think, is a very paradoxical thing to do, right? Where we learn how to talk to a machine by talking to other human beings. And even more people are now learning from from talking to machines how to talk to other human beings. So it's a
Yeah.
really crazy world we're in, right?
It
Yeah,
it is a crazy matrix situation
yeah,
that we're living in, right? It
exactly.
really is. It really is. I mean, so you are a family man, you are a dad,
Hmm.
you are in data and AI, you are in the thick of it from a space perspective, right? How do you balance the that piece of it with your family, right? There's so many people that are like, oh, I'm not giving my kid an iPad or a phone until they're 20. And then there's some people that hand them their 18-month-olds in a baby carriage, and they have a, here mom hands them the phone to play with while they're shopping or whatever.
Right.
Yeah, how do you balance that and or embrace it, right?
Yeah. That's a
What are your
great question.
thoughts?
I think that's exactly the balance to find, because on the one hand side, I want them to not become screen dependent immediately, right? Even as adults, we spend so much time with screens and on our phones specifically that it's not actually mentally healthy for us, right? So I don't want them to go into that vicious cycle of just keep on using a screen. But at the same time, I don't think we can afford them to learn how to interact with digital touch points too late, right? Because they need to live in that world. And if we want them to be independent, they need to kind of know their way around it too, since everything becomes more digitalized now. And I think in the world of AI, right, it's fascinating what we can do with it already. And I think the kids will not only see me and my partner, for example, looking and using AI applications, but they might see it also their friends' parents, for example, do it too, right? So in a way, they need to know what are the risks and opportunities with it too, but of course, in a very simple way. So finding that balance, I think, is key. What I'm doing, at least, is to give them screen time in a limited temporary period, right? And tell them, now we have 10 minutes and let's do this specific thing together. For example, that might be just watching an episode of a certain kid series, but it might be also together prompting to generate a picture that we find really funny, right?
Yeah, that
That
would
could be
be,
also
yeah,
it.
it's awesome.
So those are the kind of things I try to do. So being purposeful and not just hanging out on a screen without any purpose, because that can easily become far too much, right? So that's kind of the
Right.
idea. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, no, definitely. And it's a balancing act, right?
Right.
Because every family is different. So,
Exactly.
I back in the video game days before computer gaming,
Mm.
it was, who had what game system, and then they had little pockets of friends that had the same gaming system. These are the Xbox kids and Atari before that and Commodore
Right.
before that, right? And so they had different pockets. So I think I agree with you. I think it's really important that we expose them as much as we can,
Hmm.
and embrace it and expose them in a controlled manner and teach them how to use it,
Yeah.
um, as much as we can. Sometimes I feel like they're teaching us, right? My
Yeah,
kids
that is
can
so true.
my
Yeah.
kids can use social media like nobody's business, way better than I could. Um,
Yeah. Mm.
but yeah, so and there's another part of you that I love, that I find fascinating, that I want to talk about. So if you're okay, I want to kind of shift gears and
Sure.
go from hardcore data AI space and inclusivity. But I would like to talk and explore about why inclusivity is actually so important for you as
Hmm.
a human, right? And share with the audience a little bit about who you are and what your background is and why inclusivity is something that is a soul project for you, right? This is something that really resonates in who you are. So can
Hmm.
you introduce that part of you now to this
Absolutely.
audience, and let's dive into that a little bit, because I find it fantastic.
Yeah, sure. So my background is that I was born and raised in Berlin, in Germany, but my parents were Chinese immigrants, basically first generation. So they came both in with a scholarship to do their PhDs, and then basically decided to stay here. And then they had me. So I grew up with, let's say, very Chinese parents, actually, but in a German environment. And all that was not always easy, right? Because especially in the 80s, 90s, Germany was not that open yet, I would say. And I was basically a rare sight to look at, with
Yeah.
being looking Asian and being an Asian basically person. And even when I was visiting my relatives in China, it would very quickly disillusion people, where they would realize, that a kid actually talks differently and behaves differently than the other kids. He might not be from here. So in a way, I very quickly got into that field of feeling different, right? Of being treated like a different one, and then thereby also not feeling like I belong to them. But instead of dwelling on that problem, right, and seeing that always as something I need to be sad about, I decided to do my best to make everyone else around me feel included more, because I don't want anyone else to feel the things that I needed to feel. That includes not only how I show up at work, right, and how I try to make my teams that I lead or the project that I lead more inclusive spaces and psychologically safe spaces, but also now as a parent, and back to the question from before, I have a much bigger motivation, right? I kind of need to be role models for them, but I also want to let them know that there's a way how to come out of that, right? Even if they will experience maybe some difficult racism related incidents in their lives, which I will not be able to protect them from, I need to show them that I have gone through the same and similar things, but I came up with a resilient and an inclusive mindset. And I hope that my kids can take that away there too. So it comes down finally from my own values, how I want to behave, into what is my legacy in the world too, literally with my kids, but also what do I want to leave in that world, right? And that is kind of my motivation to be inclusive.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. How was it for you navigating the cultural differences, right?
Yeah,
Because so why don't you share that a little bit for the listeners who may not be, familiar with what the cultural differences are between Germany and China, right?
absolutely. Yeah. I think, I mean, maybe generally speaking, China and conflict management is a very interesting one, because conflicts are very um, rarely spoken out loud and explicitly, and they happen more between the lines, like could be passive aggressively or not mentioned at all, and then being spoken about behind someone's back, right? But it only is being spoken and addressed in a direct way when it explodes and then becomes really dramatic and emotional, right? Whereas in Germany, it's much more used to just in a quiet or like in a calm and constructive manner to talk about disagreements, to solve it, so it never has to explode in a certain way, right? And just having that, and basically how I dealt with conflicts with my own parents, for example, versus how I would deal with conflicts with my friends, was also then very different. So I didn't know what was the right way, and I learned from mostly both sides what actually is a better way to do so or not. But I, for example, then think in my case that the Western way of doing it more and addressing it in a calm way is for me much more comfortable than letting it explode and having a very dramatic conversation about it, let's say, right?
Right.
And the same is about how we basically find or define our success in life in either being individualistic, um, let's say successful, or being collectively successful, right? What I mean by that is, I think in Chinese values, I would often feel like if I did it according to the group's consensus of what is great, then I'm successful. Versus in the Western world, if I did it differently than anyone else, then I'm successful, right? Like if I did it that nobody else had thought about, then actually that makes me stand out. And that is a very interesting tangent field, because it goes between you are best if you are as conform as possible, versus you are best if you are as unique as possible, right?
Right.
And I was always jumping between that. So even like with my current persona that I am, right, I would say I tend more towards the Western side now, because even me just still being an Asian person in a data space, which sounds little, but I don't see that many Asian faces actually in the data space, for example,
Really?
right? So I'm still a pretty much rather tending to be a unique person, even by not even making any efforts to it. I'm just who I am, right? So in a way,
Right.
I have to get used to it. So why not even just play with it and go along with it even more?
Yeah, no, that's great. That is fantastic. And I know that there's more one other side to you
Hmm.
that I love, and that's the fact that you're a musician.
Yes. Hmm.
Um and I'd love for you to share with us a little bit about that and that journey, because I think that it makes you fantastically human. This
Yeah,
all of
absolutely.
these pieces.
Yeah, so I started playing the piano when I was 5, but then I also started joining like cover bands and big bands, and started my own songwriting when I was a teenager. And even during my studies, I did a lot of performances. I was a bar pianist. I recorded songs in my own little home studio and did a lot more to it. But then basically after my university graduation, I wanted to be professional, right? And started basically taking the music side into a hobby and kept it to myself rather, and just was a professional without showing my musical side to it. It wasn't until a few years ago, especially during COVID times, where I decided to actually show my musical side more to the world, also on a professional level. For example, then I made funny songs about home office and virtual meetings and homeschooling the kids, etc., etc. That really resonated with people. And I realized that it's not an either or, right? It's not actually either I'm professional by not talking about music or I'm not professional by bringing my music side, but I was able to combine it, right? I was still able to be a good leader and a good colleague, but I showed my authentic side of being a passionate musician too, and it kind of worked. So nowadays, and especially over the last few years, I started making songs about data and AI with really the clear goal of making it more fun and accessible, but
Yeah.
also putting a little bit more just joy and humor into it in a space that's so easy to be taken in a very dry and serious way. And it kind of works. That makes me know who I am. That also is one of the reasons why I get invited to conferences, because I have a very unique take on things and I'm able to combine my humor with the music to those topics that is on everyone's minds. And yeah, I'm very happy that I'm able to do that.
Where can we listen to these songs?
Yeah, I'm on my original songs are on Spotify and all the streaming platforms, and my bigger collection of music videos is on YouTube. So I have a YouTube channel
Oh,
for those things, so people can check that out.
okay. And the YouTube channel is called
Oh, it's just my name. It's
just
Tiankai
your
Feng.
name.
So yeah,
Oh, okay. Just your
yeah,
name. Well, go check it out.
exactly.
Um, I love your energy. I know that a lot of people think about data people as the accountants of tech,
Yes.
right?
Hmm.
Just kind of quiet and reserved and, in the basement,
Exactly.
on the back end. And I love that you are bringing such a breath of fresh air to this exciting space because if you really sit and think about it, data is exciting.
Yeah.
Data is what drives forward motion in
Yeah.
every single aspect of your life, right?
Yeah.
And I think that it's important that we focus on data, information, right?
Absolutely.
Content.
Yes.
Um, I encourage people to go search you up and watch your videos, learn more about you. You have been fascinating to have on this show. It has been my honor and my pleasure to get to know you over the last few weeks. I would love to continue this conversation and relationship and come back and check in with you in a few months time and maybe we can convince you to play a little tune for us.
Sure.
Um,
Hmm.
I would love that and really talk more about where AI is going. I have particular interest in the AI, especially in the mental health space, right? Because it is evolving so quickly and people are using it for personal mental health, but we're individuals, right? We're human. And so whether it's work or personal, whatever it is, it does play into who you are. So I'd like to continue this conversation about that. So
Hmm.
if you're amenable,
Absolutely.
I know that you have a few different things in the works. You just launched a book, which is fantastic.
Hmm.
So can we introduce that to the audience as well before we wrap this up? I want to talk about that for a few minutes.
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually released my second book just recently now. It's called Humanizing AI Strategy. And the whole idea is, I mean, a lot of the things that we talked about today already, right? So it's really about how do we make sure that we can create and design AI applications initiatives in a human centric way and not in a way that is actually against humanity, either intentionally or unintentionally. And there's a lot of things to consider about that, right? So in the way of what tasks we are giving to AI agents or not, and what should we keep human, what should we not keep human anymore, and what can we delegate, versus how do we make sure we communicate in the right way? When should we use AI to communicate with others, or how do we create assets and be creative with or without AI? And I have a lot of thoughts about that basically put into that book. And I would be very happy if people could check that out. I hope it's a more refreshing take on things that are not about technology all the time, but it's really more about how we work with AI and less about what the newest models are and what the technologies are.
Right. And I love that. I love that you focus on humanizing it, right? I think that's really important. So I would like to thank you very much for your time today. This has been a pleasurable conversation, and I look forward to speaking with you again soon and hearing a tune or two. Maybe you can write something special for us,
Yeah,
and discuss, where you are and what you're working on at that time. I really think that you're doing fantastic things in humanizing and creating inclusivity in this space and celebrating diversity of thought, in a space that some people may find or think that is dry, right? Data dry.
yeah,
But
absolutely.
it is not. It is bleeding edge. It is interesting and exciting and full of information.
Exactly. Yeah,
Right?
exactly.
So many learnings from it. So thank you so much for your time today. That is all we have for you today at the Give Back Lab. Stay tuned. New episode coming soon. Have a great day.
Thanks for joining us today in the Give Back Lab. If today's conversation moved you, challenged you, or made you just feel seen, share it forward. That's how change begins. Until next time, keep showing up, keep speaking truth, and giving back in your own way. The lab is always open.